Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about science. This video discusses an example of the Orwellian concept of doublespeak. A few weeks ago, President Trump was pushing hydroxychloroquine as a treatment for COVID-19. He was viciously attacked by Democrats in the press because they said that treatment was not proven to be safe and effective. And then when a Michigan Democrat lawmaker credited President Trump for saving her life, she was viciously attacked by fellow Democrats. State Representative Karen Whitsitt, Democrat Detroit, broke protocol by meeting with President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence during an April 14 meeting of COVID-19 survivors, during which she credited hydroxychloroquine for saving her life, a Democratic district leader said. It would appear that for Democrats, telling the truth is breaking protocol. Detroit Democrats unanimously censor lawmaker who credited Trump. Democrats said they were upset with President Trump because he was pushing a treatment which wasn't proven to be safe and effective. These were the same Democrats who blindly jumped into the idea of lockdowns which were guaranteed not to be safe, and there was no evidence that they were effective. As a direct result of these panic lockdowns, there are now more than 35 million Americans unemployed. Democrats say they want safe and effective, but apparently what they really want is maximum death rates and maximum unemployment ahead of the election. They were extremely upset that hydroxychloroquine was saving lives because President Trump was the one who suggested it. The New York Times predicted 2 million American deaths from coronavirus. Here's the grimmest version of life a year from now. More than 2 million Americans have died from the new coronavirus, almost all mourned without funerals. Countless others have died because hospitals are too overwhelmed to deal adequately with heart attacks, asthma, and diabetic crises. The economy is cratered into a depression, for fiscal and monetary policy are ineffective when people fear going out. The first half of their analysis was wildly exaggerated, but the second half was spot on. It's very difficult for the economy to recover while people are scared. And people like the New York Times and many other journalists are doing everything they can to keep people scared. David Levitt, who says he's an award-winning multimedia journalist, predicted that more than 13 million Americans could die. That's an excellent way to get people scared in order to keep the economy shut down and to keep unemployment at the highest possible level. Joe Biden's medical expert predicted 100 million coronavirus cases in the United States for 2 weeks ago. There was nothing political about that prediction, I'm sure. The modeler who started the whole mass panic was just let go by the UK government. He violated social distancing protocol to commit adultery with his married lover, who also just happens to be a climate activist who wants the world's economy shut down. It shouldn't surprise anyone that virus activists and climate activists seek the same goals. The New York Times predictions about massive unemployment were spot on, but their forecast of a massive surge in COVID cases around the United States missed the mark entirely. Obviously, New York was hit very hard, but here's the data for hospital occupancy at one of the largest hospitals in Arizona. They never had a surge, and in fact, hospital occupancy and emergency room occupancy have been near record lows. I've heard the same story from hospital workers at many other locations around the country. Hospital activity is very low, and medical staff are being furloughed. Many people with medical problems like heart conditions and cancer are not getting treatment. The problem isn't that hospitals are overloaded, quite the opposite. The problem is that the patients are scared to go to the hospital because of fear created by the mass media. Some locations were hit very hard, but the vast majority of the United States never came anywhere close to the model forecasts. The 13 million deaths predicted by David Levitt and the 2 million deaths predicted by the New York Times were complete nonsense. But the massive unemployment predicted by the New York Times was quite real. Tens of millions of people around the country are no longer allowed to work, and they're becoming unable to feed their families. The Democratic governor of Michigan responded by accusing people protesting her policies of being racist. According to Democrats, resisting tyranny is now considered to be racist. The Democratic governor of New Mexico not only has the whole state locked down, but she's also placed one city under martial law. And she's requiring all workers to wear masks. Now let's compare the Democratic governors to Republican Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota. She says, "Our state motto is a beautiful one. Under God, the people rule. That's what our system of government is all about. The people of South Dakota are the source of the power and legitimacy of our government, not the media, not politicians, and not political parties. That's a healthy perspective for any elected official to keep in mind. Our Back to Normal plan doesn't include new government programs, more red tape, prescriptive phases, tight controls, or anything like that. That's not South Dakota. Rather, our plan continues to put the power of decision-making into the hands of the people, where it belongs. I trust South Dakotans to continue to exercise common sense, reasonableness, innovation, and a commitment to themselves, their families, and in turn, their communities. Republican governors are talking about a return to normal, while Democratic governors are talking about a new normal. Meanwhile, in Texas, a left-wing judge ordered that a woman who opened her salon parlor be sentenced to jail. The Texas Supreme Court overturned this, and the governor of Texas made it clear that this was not going to happen to anyone else. And the Texas State Attorney General is going to cover the $7,000 fine, which was issued by the left-wing judge. The point that I'm trying to get at is that Republicans have an incredible opportunity for an unprecedented landslide this November. Democrats are setting themselves up as the party of tyranny and unemployment, while Republicans are setting themselves up as the party of freedom and opportunity. This seems like it should be a no-brainer, but there's a big problem. It's called fear. Governors all over the country are afraid of a second surge, even though there never really was a first surge in most of the states. Outside of New York City and a few other places, hospitals never got overloaded. The lockdowns were promoted as a way to flatten the curve. But the lockdowns have strayed far from their original objective. Now they're more like, we're going to stay locked down until there's no more risk of anybody getting the virus. Which is an absurd way to think because the virus is not going away and people are going to remain vulnerable as long as they don't have immunity. There's no end game for the current lockdowns. The one country which has handled this intelligently is Sweden. They kept children under the age of 15 in school, they never shut down their restaurants and bars, and they minimized damage to their country's economy and the psyche of their citizens. People in Stockholm are being told that in a few weeks they will have obtained herd immunity, and the danger of the virus will be very low. This will allow their citizenry to return to a normal life. But here in the U.S., and particularly in Democratic states, that's going to be very difficult, because people are scared. The Swedish government understood the problem of fear since day one, and handled it very intelligently. But the one thing the Swedish government and many other countries didn't do very well was protecting nursing homes from the virus. It's been known for months now that the vast majority of deaths from coronavirus were people who are very elderly or had serious pre-existing conditions. About half of the deaths in Europe were in nursing homes. What happened in Italy at the nursing homes was described as a massacre because the state sent sick patients to the nursing homes. And Governor Cuomo of New York did exactly the same thing. He sent sick patients into nursing homes full of elderly people. This was the order from Governor Cuomo in which he told nursing homes that they had to accept patients who'd been infected with COVID-19. This document has since been removed from the New York government web pages, but it's still available on the web archive. And now Governor Cuomo claims that he never knew anything about the New York rule in which he forced nursing homes to accept COVID-19 patients. Now let's look at what Dr. Fauci was doing while this was going on. Instead of him warning New York State not to do this incredibly foolish thing, he was appearing on CNN saying that every single state should be locked down. Instead of focusing on protecting people in high-risk groups, Dr. Fauci was focusing on making people in low-risk groups unemployed. Instead of alleviating fear, U.S. officials were doing everything they could to aggravate it. And now the U.S. government is paying hospitals to say everything which looks like it might be COVID-19 is COVID-19. They're writing COVID on all the death certificates, whether they had a positive test, whether they didn't, in order to obtain federal funding. Famous statistician Matt Briggs has shown that just about all deaths now are being reported as COVID-19. He calls this the most colossal and costly overblown forecast of all time. As I said before, Republicans have a great opportunity to make unprecedented gains in the November election, but they're faltering because of fear. President Trump has criticized Sweden, which is the one country which we should be following. Here's a graph from the Swedish Statistics Agency for all mortality from January 1st through April 15th. There's been no excess mortality in Sweden this year. In fact, they've been slightly below average. The fact that President Trump is criticizing Sweden shows that he's listening to the wrong people. Deaths in Sweden peaked around the middle of April, and now they're dropping off, just like most other places. And because of the strategy which the government took, by the end of May, people in Stockholm will not be scared. Meanwhile, back in the United States, President Trump keeps saying he wants states to get open. But then when Georgia did open, he criticized them for doing it. But since Georgia opened a couple weeks ago, the number of COVID-19 cases has plummeted. President Trump needs to get some new advisors so that he can stick with a coherent policy of moving forwards. I'm planning on going to Arizona next week to photograph the blooming of the saguaro cactus. Just like in Sweden and many other places, deaths in Arizona peaked in mid-April and have dropped off sharply since then. And they're going to be reopening restaurants in less than a week. The last restaurant I ate at was in Arizona about an hour before they shut down 2 months ago. I'll be going back to that same restaurant next week to celebrate a return to sanity in Arizona. This is the current graph of COVID death rates per million for many countries around the world. The United States is here in red, and this is Sweden. You can see that regardless of government policy, many countries are on the same trajectory. Governments do not control viruses. Denmark started lifting their lockdowns a few weeks ago, and there are no signs whatsoever that the partial reopening has caused a bigger spread of infection. But Democrats and the left don't want the United States reopened. They see massive unemployment as being an election issue for them in November. David Levitt, who predicted 13 million deaths in the United States, is very upset that President Trump is trying to reopen the country. President Trump and Republicans need to eliminate the fear completely. They need to move forward, and if the Republicans do so, they will obliterate the Democrats in the November election. At this point, unemployment and poverty are a far greater fear than is the virus. I'm going to finish this video up with a great quote I saw on Twitter. I'm impressed at how smart the coronavirus really is. It doesn't contaminate you at Walmart, Target, Costco, supermarkets, etc., but it sure will get you at churches, hair salons, nail salons, restaurants, bars, and any other small business. In order to understand what's driving this panic, all you need to do is follow the money. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science and propaganda for a long time.